Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 29th of January 2025. Coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And myself G7URP. Lovely to see you. On tonight's show, we learn all about the innovative Aziloop antenna from its creator Dave Evans' GW4GTE. We share a film taken at the 3D printing and laser cutting evening at Norfolk Amateur Radio Club. And we ask and find out, what on earth is this? And I'm going to reveal now that we've, the first time possibly ever, but certainly for a very long time, that we've only had one entry to this. So have a good look at that. As a radio amateur, that's the only clue, and I think I'm allowed to do this. You should know what this is. Apparently, all right? Have a good look. If you know what it is, it's not too late to put it onto BATC or on Facebook, and we'll read it out when we get to that part of the programme. But first, I'm afraid that we start with some sad news. Barry Drinkwater, M5 AEC, is silent key. Barry had been a member of NARC for a number of years and mainly attended events like field days. He had lived near Stowmarket since 2016 and was formerly G1YHF. Licensed for 37 years, Barry spent many years learning Morse, but only actually started making CW QSOs a couple of years ago. Barry's funeral will be a private one, but our thoughts and prayers are with his partner Anita, his family and his friends. Barry M5 AEC, now sadly silent key. As you probably recall, our other member Mervyn G0HZP also passed away in December, and his service for Thanksgiving for him is on this Monday, February the 3rd at 11:30 at Sprouston Methodist Church. All the details are on the newsletter and on the website. I'm mentioning it here because I've been asked to say a few words on behalf of the amateur radio community at the service. So I would really appreciate it if you knew Mervyn and had experience of working on the air or anything about him that you would like me to share. Please do drop them on an email to me before Saturday, and I'll be reading them out at the service of Thanksgiving on Monday. Now, a couple of weeks ago when we last were here on NARC Live, I mentioned the local military event, Operation Manna and Operation Chowhund, which were humanitarian food drops to relieve the famine in Holland behind Nazi lines late in World War II. And there is a special event happening on the weekend of April the 25th to the 27th. We would like some NARC members to take part in this special event. So far, only one has come forward, one person has come forward. I do appreciate that this actually is on the same weekend as International Marconi Day, which is on the Saturday. But even if you were involved with that, you could still get involved with one of the other two dates. So this is a special event happening here from the 100th Bomb Group Memorial Museum. I won't read everything I read before, but it's a brilliant place to run a special event from. Please do have a look at the website, and if you would like to get involved with that special event station, please drop me an email very soon now, because we're starting to make plans for it. So I do hope that some of you would like to take part, especially if you're interested in military radio. I think that will be a really good special event. As you know, my email address is radio@dcpmicro.com. Now, just yesterday, they publicly announced the date for National Hamfest 2025. And normally, of course, this is towards the tail end of September. But this year, it has moved the date. It's still at the Newark Showground, but much earlier this year on 5th and 6th of September. This is again a Friday and a Saturday. As before, I probably will be arranging a coach, and it's subject to there being enough people of which was only just scraped by last year, really, to make it viable. I'll be arranging a coach much nearer the time. But that's just to have a date for your diaries now, the National Hamfest at Newark Showground, 5th and 6th of September. Now, I know many of you, as members of the club, are interested in construction and electronics, as I am. And I do hope that you may want to see a really interesting presentation on Monday as part of the RSGB's Tonight at 8 series, which of course Tammy and I host for them from here in this studio. And it's a program about basic fault finding and basic electronics with Lee Aldridge, G4EJB, a very well-known author and constructor. So please have a look. There's the details there, rsgb.org/webinars. If you go there just before 8 o'clock on Monday, then you'll be able to get the link and see where to look. Or you can look on RSGB's YouTube channel. That's Monday the 3rd of February, so this coming Monday. Where did January go, hey? And that's Basic Fault Finding and Basic Electronics by Lee Aldridge, G4EJB. I'm sure that'll be interesting to anybody who wants to know a bit about electronics. And it really will be quite the basics as well. You don't think you have to be advanced to do this. The whole idea, I think, of Lee doing it actually is that when his theory, and we've done a rehearsal with him, so I know this, and having talked to him, his theory is that lots of people, excuse me, we've both got colds, as you can hear. They still haven't gone away. I thought they had. Anyway, his theory is that lots of amateurs start to have a go at construction, and often things don't work, and then really don't know how to fault find. So about half the presentation will be talking about basic electronics and then fault finding them, how to get things working. So do have a look out for that. I'll also put details in this weekend's newsletter. Now, as many of you know, we're sort of pausing courses at the moment while we find some new instructors, and particularly, hopefully, 2 lead instructors for our training. But I was told today about an in-person foundation course in London. Now, I appreciate that's quite a way for you to go, but if you're waiting for a course, a foundation course, and you want the one that's in person and not doing something online, then the Cray Valley Radio Society, which are located in Eltham, London, SE9, has a few spare places on its face-to-face foundation license course, and it's on 5th and the 12th of April 2025, so 2 consecutive Saturdays. So if anybody would like to join that, it's £65, and that includes an exam on the second day, which obviously is a fair chunk of that money. If you do want to take part in that, I would contact their exam secretary very soon, because there's only a few spaces, and his phone number is on the screen there, 07956 834 350. Almost it for the news, but just another reminder, we are of course now in 2025, and if you haven't renewed your membership yet, we hope you will do. It's still £10 for the whole year, and we do something every Wednesday, plus lots of other events of course in the summer. There's the details up on the screen, and of course on our website. And you can pay either like that, which is probably the most convenient, or if you're coming along to a club meeting at CNS, you can pay by cash or by credit card on the night. Now, I mentioned right at the beginning that a few weeks ago we had a 3D printing and laser cutting evening. We didn't really know how popular it would be. In fact, we certainly didn't expect it to be as popular as it was, did we, Tammy? But it was very popular, and we did take a bit of video on there, and we've now edited that together, and we thought that for those of you particularly who couldn't make it, you'd like to see what was involved. Our thanks to Martin, G7UGB, whose idea it was really to run it. But have a look at this quick video of what we did on the night.
Concrete onto a base, and it makes a house in 3D concrete. It's well worth watching. Just type in concrete 3D printing on YouTube and you'll see the machine actually do it. I mentioned the metal sintering machines, and there's some multi-fusion jet ones that use powder now, but they are thousands of pounds out of our league.
People can see it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
There we are, just an informal look at what we did. That was an informal evening, really, and we were surprised. I think I counted about 30 people just looking on just for that part of the demonstration, as well as other people in the room who were just having a sort of social gathering. So maybe it's something we'll do again as well. Certainly we had a lot of attention. So thanks again to Martin for the idea, and everybody who brought their own equipment as well to show on the night. Right, if Tammy's voice is up to it, over to you for Little People.
Yep, here's the Little People for this week, and here we go.
Oh, it didn't feel nice to be camping. Feels hardly the
I
weather.
think we need some better weather before we go camping.
I do. The dog looks a bit big. Am I allowed to say that?
It's a big dog.
It is a big dog.
Perhaps
That's a lovely picture.
Scooby-Doo.
I love it though. The way they improvise and use that as a sort of, I guess that's probably an American or maybe Japanese.
It's Japanese, yeah.
Power socket, because of course this is a Japanese website which Tammy picks a picture from every week. Miniature-calendar.com. Thanks very much for that, Tammy. Oh, we can dream of warmer weather. I'd certainly like that at the moment. So what have you been doing? We haven't had much news from you since we last met 2 weeks ago. We'd love to hear from you. The usual address, radio@dcpmicro.com. Have a think in the next couple of days. Send us something which we can use on the next NARC Live in 2 weeks' time. We'd love to hear from you. Now we're going to go to the competition, when 2 weeks ago I showed you this picture and said, what on earth is this? And well, it's easy when you know what it is, kind of. But, be honest, we only had one entry.
We have got...
have we got some entries here?
Yep, we have. Bruce, G4GTE, said, a wild guess at the mystery object. Is it a variable resistor?
Yeah, good guess. And the only guess that we had by post, thank you, Bruce, for that, by the way. The only guess we had, other than that, was from Steve G3EVA, who said, is the mystery object a variac or variometer? So it's very similar sort of vein, really, to that. Well, we don't think it is that. And we can reveal now what it is, I suppose, if I hold this one up. Because this is one item we've got in the studio. It was sent to us by Daniel 2E0JNW. And Tammy, I don't know if we can go to camera 1 now and just show you. So I'm going to show you a bit that we didn't show you. So this is the actual object. Okay. And hopefully you can see inside there. But if I turn it round a bit, we thought this would just give it away if we showed you this bit. So obviously it is variable. Now I wonder if some of you know what that is now. I'll read. This was given to us by Daniel 2E0JNW, and he gave it to us not actually knowing himself exactly what it is. I mean, I can tell you that looking in here, there is a variable capacitor which you wouldn't have seen on that, but you can just see the veins. If I hold that really close, you might see it.
I don't think you can see it, can you?
You just see the veins.
Got a torch
If I move this round, this is very
like
impromptu, but you see the veins there. Those of you into electronics already would know what a variable resistor, a variable capacitor.
Put some light in there.
I'll try, Tammy. Yeah. We should have planned this.
We should have.
Here we are. Oh, there we are. That might help. There is a track at the bottom maybe, but these are veins in a variable capacitor. Does that help you? I'll now, thank you, Tams. Well, I'll read out exactly what Daniel sent us. A couple of weeks after I gave you the current mystery object, Gordon G3PXT brought some items to the free table at the CNS meeting. Among them was something that bore a striking resemblance to the thing which I didn't really know what it was and left with you. And it was helpfully labelled, here we are, Raymart Band Checker. Now, with that information in hand, I think what I gave you is a partial, not complete, wave meter, which is a device used to check the correct tuning of a hams transmitter, and one that the GPO once required every radio amateur to be in possession of. I'm watching our guest this evening, Dave, who's in Wales, and we'll be meeting shortly, and he's nodding away there. So he's the only one I can see really with this. But anyway, so that's what we think it is. If you know different, or if this has changed your mind. I mean, I'm guessing this could, because most radio amateurs, or many radio amateurs, are very good at constructing, this could even be something handmade. It would be very elaborate, but if you were good on a lathe, you may be able to make that bit here, this bit of brass. And I guess it could have been completely scratch built, as we call it. There's a light bulb here. And the idea being the light bulb would light when I guess this is resonant, probably, to detect the wave. But it's no longer a requirement. It was when I started in the hobby, but no longer a requirement for everybody to have it. Anyway, we hope that's what it is. Thanks to Steve and to Bruce who entered. But it's one of those evenings where sometimes, and we might have a few others like that, where people genuinely don't know what they are. Do you remember we were given something which someone left in someone's shack, and we put it on here because they genuinely didn't know what it was, and you found out, you told us what it was. Anyway, so thanks very much, Daniel, for giving that. We'll bring things back to you at the next meeting. So, what have we got lined up for you now? Let's have another look at. Let's have our first look at this week's object. When I say, what on earth is this? And one thing that Tammy just told me on this, by the way, this is 100th. What on earth is this? We had about 80 shacks back in the day, when we were locked down, and we had something like this, and you all sent us pictures of your shacks. There was about 80 of those. Then we kind of ran out. So then we went to this what on earth, and this is the 100th what on earth picture. Do you know what that is? It is. Well, I'm not allowed to say.
No, you're not allowed to say.
I get smacked if I do, but I do know what that is actually from it. But some of you may, I hope you will, send us your answers to radio@dcpmicro.com. You've got just under 2 weeks to do that. If you know what that item is, or what it's for, what it's called maybe, that's certainly what it's for, and we'll read your answer out in a couple of weeks when we reveal what that is.
Dun, dun, dun.
So before we meet tonight's guest, just a chance to go and have a look at what's happening on this week at the Norfolk Amateur Radio Club. On Sunday at 7 o'clock, it's the GB2RS News on GB3MB. Excuse me. On Monday evening at 7:30, the Monday Night Net on GB3MB, open to anyone, of course, to run or join that net. I think Steve, G3EVA, runs a lot of them now, but it's not really fair for any one person to do it every week. So if you feel like running it, I'm sure I'd be very pleased for a break on that. At 8 o'clock on Monday, the CW Net on 3.543 megahertz. And then next Wednesday, February the 5th, we're meeting back at the school, so not here online, between 7 and 9:30. It's a social informal and also bright sparks for our younger members when they'll be building something. By the way, the next NARC Live is on the 12th of February, when the title of the talk, which I think is fascinating, and I don't know more about it than this at the moment, is 40 metres on a glue stick. So it'll be interesting to see what that is. Anyway, send us your stories and your pictures and any mystery objects as well, please, to the usual address, radio@dcpmicro.com. And of course also this card, which we're very happy to send to anybody to cheer them up. To anybody at all. They don't have to be amateurs, they don't have to be members of the club or anything like that. In fact, we just sent one a couple of days ago to poor old John, G8VPE, who's not very well and is in hospital again. So we think sending a card like this, from what the feedback we get, does really cheer people up. All you need to do is drop us an email with their name and address, and we'll add your name to ours and send it to them. So now we move on to tonight's main event, and our guest is not in another country. Well, he is. Yes, I shouldn't say that, should I? He is in another country. He's in Wales. He's in the Great Britain, though. And it's really nice to welcome Dave Evans, GW4GTE. Hello, Dave.
Well, hello, David. And thank you very much for inviting me onto this programme. And thanks, Tammy, for lining everything up as well and keeping it running.
Yeah, it's lovely to meet you.
Good, thank you. And I must say that until you kindly invited me onto here, I hadn't really heard of Norfolk Amateur Radio Club, and quite honestly, I think for the first time ever, I wish I lived in Norfolk because it looks like a great organisation. And if you've come here to watch me, please stick around and look at some of the other excellent videos that are on here. I've dipped into them and I must look at some more because there's some excellent stuff. Or if you've come here to see what it was you were told not to watch, even so, look at all the rest of the stuff on here. So, okay, right, let's kick off.
Can I just say,
So,
Dave, before we kick off with you, just a reminder to everybody at home, I'm sure you're aware now, if you have any questions for Dave or any comments or anything about anything he's going to show you tonight, then obviously you can ask them in the usual places, BATC and, on Facebook, and we'll read them to Dave at the end. But now over to you, Dave, for your presentation. Thanks.
okay, lovely. Thank you, David. So the Aziloop receive antenna, and this should, well, when I time this, it'll take about an hour, so it'll probably take about 6 hours in real life, but we'll give it a go. So tonight then, obviously I'm going to be talking mainly about Aziloop, but I'm going to broaden that out a little bit to talk about the two types of antenna it essentially consists of, the loop and the K9AY, and go back in time a little bit. And a description of the Aziloop hardware, but to stick around to the end because there's a few videos of Aziloop in operation. So if you don't believe what I'm claiming, you can see it for yourselves on the videos. And if you fast forwarded to that, shame on you. But even so, I hope you enjoy it. So here we go. So let's have a quick look first of all at the HF receive antenna market, and essentially it boils down to small receive loops, some vertical rods, and a range of specialized antennas. And if we look at loops, there's really only one passive loop that springs to mind, which is the AirSpy U-loop, and I'm assuming that's you as in Youssef, who owns the AirSpy company. And I've not tried one myself, but I believe it's designed to work well with their range of SDR products, which I do have, and they're excellent. And incidentally, forgot to mention at the start, in the same way that Youssef is U-loop, Aziloop, no, my name isn't Azzy, but Azzy is short for azimuth loop, and there's a bit of a clue there, I think, in that. If we look at active loops, and this isn't comprehensive, it's just a sort of a selection to illustrate the point. We've got the cross-country wireless, which I believe is now in version 4, and that's it there. That's a fairly small loop. There's two circles. I don't know. I assume they're in series to improve the output, but I don't absolutely know. That incidentally is mounted horizontally, which is interesting. Then we've got an example of a fixed aluminium, I think it's aluminium loop from DX Engineering. They've got a range of different loops, and that's just one of them, I think. And then the Wellbrook loop, the ALA 1530 and ALA 100. I've got examples here of both of them. In fact, the 1530 is my backup antenna at my remote site. And sadly, as most of you will know, Andy Eichen is no longer with us, but his excellent product lives on. So if anybody's got one of those, don't sell it. You will not find anything better as an active receive loop. So moving on then, vertical rods, not so many to pick from here, but I found one, DX Engineering again, have this RSEAV-1 or -8. In fact, I think they'll sell you 4 as well. In fact, I suspect they'll sell you as many as you want to buy. The point here is you can phase them together and produce a narrower waveform in a given direction, but not so difficult, not so easy rather, to rotate. So there's a clue there for later. Getting into the sort of specialized area, there's this shared apex array from Array Solutions, and this is discontinued. This is no longer being manufactured. This was an interesting one because it's a pair of orthogonal loops, i.e. 2 loops at right angles, but each of those 2 loops is actually 2 loops in its own right, and those 2 loops are phased together to produce a cardioid pattern. And I think this one is 8 headings, and I think when they were in production they were quite popular. Also in the specialized area is beverage antenna, if you happen to have a field about a couple of 100 yards long, depending on the band, you can put this long antenna out. Very easy to set up, but of course not so difficult, not so easy to rotate. But it gives a very good performance. You can see a picture of the lobe diagram there. Oh, and by the way, I'm a little bit croaky tonight, so I think it's contagious wherever it is, David. Excuse me. So, right, the other specialised antenna is the K9AY. Again, Array Solutions had one of those, and that's now discontinued. But Hand Parts in Europe manufacture one. That, I believe, is 4-way, and you've got a range of switches, comprehensive really, on that control box. You can switch between the 4 directions, and it looks like there's some LEDs to indicate that. I think you can change the load value, which is very useful, and switch filters, bandpass filters in on the reception path. And I think the right-hand knob is to do with controlling the signal path between your transmit antenna and this, so possibly quite useful. So summing that up then, general use, if we sort of generally call it that, is loop antennas and whip antennas, and specialised things like Beveridge and K9AY. So for reasons that will become obvious, I'm just going to look at loop antennas versus K9AY antennas. We're not going to get too technical here, so don't worry, just a broad look at this, just to compare the response of the two of them. Now this antenna is, at higher angles, is omnidirectional, as you can see. And if we look at it as a slice here in this manner, you can see the overall response at 90 degrees elevation is a perfect circle. But if you look at it, it's a perfect circle because the total field is a combination of the horizontal field and the vertical field, and that's really the case for most, well, for all antennas really. And the peaks and nulls in one polarization are the exact opposite to the peaks and nulls in the other, and overall that gives you that sort of circular, well, circular is a wrong expression, omnidirectional performance at high angles. If we look lower down, more towards the horizon, this is at 5 degrees elevation. ESNEC can't model 0 degrees, so I've just gone with 5 degrees. You see it changes. We've still got the horizontal and vertical polarization. There's much less of a contribution now from the horizontal polarization, although both have dropped slightly, though not too many dBs. But you can see the effect now is when you combine the two and look at the total field that you're starting to get more of a figure of 8 pattern. And if you went down to the horizon, you would find that the horizontal polarization would completely disappear, and it would just be vertical polarization, and then you get a very sharp null on the sides. So that explains the confusing thing sometimes. People say loops are omnidirectional, and other people say there's a sharp null to the sides, but as is the most important thing to consider with these all sorts of reception antennas, is what angle you're talking about, because they don't perform the same at any angle. In fact, no antenna does really, unless it's in free space. So moving on then, the other type of antenna is the K9AY, and this was developed by Gary Breed, K9AY, funny enough, several decades ago in fact. I'm not sure what that red arrow is, I just pinched this diagram from somewhere, and I think that direction of reception does not mean something you'd find in a hotel corridor. I think it's to do with which way it's pointing. So it is a loop, but it's different to a normal loop in that you've got a termination in there of, in this case, 600 ohms. And I say the full Gary because that's the full size that he recommends, but we're going to discuss sizes of antennas later. So just to read what someone else actually says here, the antenna is a combination of a magnetic loop and a sense antenna for the E field. The magnetic loop, of course, is the H field. The magnetic loop is directive but has no front to rear ratio. The E field antenna has omnidirectional sensitivity. The combination in correct phase and amplitude, and that's something to remember, in correct phase and amplitude, results in a front to rear ratio of more than 25 dBs, and I'd agree with that, over the frequency range of 500 kilohertz to around 3 megs, which I wouldn't strictly agree with, because I'm going to demonstrate that it works to a much lower frequency and well, a significantly higher frequency as well. So it's a bit more useful than it might suggest there. So the plot on axis of a K9AY is a little bit like this, and anyone who's heard of this antenna will be familiar with this, of course. You've got the broad sort of, well, the bulbous main front lobe, and in this case a little bit of a rear lobe as well. But that can be varied with that load resistor that I mentioned at the start. And that sharp notch is, I think, a lot of the time where people can quote huge nulls or front to back ratios. If you can drop a signal into that notch area, as you can see, you're going to get a huge attenuation. We'll come back to that in a second. Now, let me just come back to that. So that's, yeah, that's the side one. If we look at 20 degrees elevation, looking down on top of it now, as if we're flying over it, you can see the cardioid diagram of the total field. Now, if you remember, going back to the loop antenna, the waveform of a horizontally polarized wave, the pickup, was at 90 degrees to the vertical in the standard magnetic loop. In this, they're at least at this angle, the nulls are appearing at the same place, and that's combining at the rear to give that sharp null, which corresponds to quite a useful front to back. In fact, it's really showing slightly more than 30 dBs there. That's 20 degrees. If we go up to 45 degrees, not so good in a way, and you can see there now that there is a rear lobe developing in the vertical plane, and that's combining with the horizontal, which is kind of staying the same. That never changes, but the amplitude of it does change at different angles. But it's filling in that rear null, so you're still going to get a front to back, but not quite as impressive. But one thing you will notice is that you're getting a null in the vertical polarization either side of the rear of the main axis. The antenna, by the way, is running along the x-axis. And if you try to DF something, if you had the power to rotate a K9AY, you might find that you're getting two nulls and wondering what's happening, and that is why. And it depends really as well on which is the dominant polarization that's coming in. From the ionosphere, they scramble, but not always. You get one or other that takes over. So that's an interesting point. So coming back then to that null, that's really the K9AY party trick. You've got that sweet spot, and if you have the facility to vary the load resistor, it changes the position of that null. So if you've got something coming in that broad sort of angle that you can see on the screen there, and you've got quite a, what's that, 30 degrees or something. If that was towards Europe or somewhere, that would cover most of Europe. That's when it hits the ground again. That's quite a large range of distances. So that's quite useful. So just to sum it up then, this just shows the difference between the two, the pure magnetic loop on the left and the K9AY on the right, which is more known as a DX antenna. So completely, well, not completely different, but fairly different. So I decided I wanted both, really, plus a free rotator, because you're going to have to rotate those to change the directions, because sod's law, something's going to be in a normal 1 minute and not the next. But it's not available. I found it wasn't available. So I thought, well, I better go and make my own. And I did, and I called it Aziloop. Funny enough. So the Aziloop loop gives me a compact dual mode loop, and as far as I know, it is unique in that there is no other antenna you can buy off the shelf that is dual mode, K9AY and loop. I haven't mentioned this yet, but here's the big reveal. It is also absolutely unique, and as far as I know, the very first antenna available to amateur radio that will electronically rotate and indeed in 5-degree steps in this version. And also you can remotely control it from anywhere, not necessarily unique, but this combination certainly is. So I thought, yeah, excellent, that's what I want. But I'm a bit of a tweaker really, and I can never rest on things for long without trying to improve them. So once I got the basic thing working, I added a few extra bits. So I made the K9 load value, K9AY load value adjustable in 50 ohm steps. I put in a variable attenuator and made the preamp switchable. I put in a PTT mute feature for shared sites, of which there are many, of course. Most of us have got that, so as that you avoid blowing the thing up. Although I have to say, no one yet has blown a preamp up, but don't treat that as an invitation. There's 2 user configurable bidirectional open drain I/O ports. That's a mouthful. They're quite handy. For instance, so that you can allocate the PTT mute function to those, or one of them, or both. There are 4 memories that you can store the system state, which most of the time would mean the mode K9 or loop mode, the direction, the resistor value, and so on. That's a software feature, so you could put more in, but I can remember up to 4, so I thought 4 was a good value to stop at. And there's 4 switchable pre-selection filters in there ahead of the preamp, and that's ahead of anything, in fact, whether the preamp is in or out. 500 kc's low pass, it should be 5.5 megs actually, low pass, a 1.7 meg high pass, and a 1.7 to, it should be 5.5 band pass, which is made by switching in the 5 meg 5.5 low pass and the 1.7 high pass. And so that gives you, funny enough, a band pass filter that covers top band and 80, which are arguably the 2 bands this was aimed at, although I do use it for a lot of other things, as we'll see. You can also change the colour of the whole thing so that you can match the SDR that you like if you've got that on the screen. You can there's extensive RF overload and transient protection. There's gas discharge tubes, transient voltage suppressors, and small signal diodes plastered throughout the thing. There's also reverse polarity protection on both units. That's the head unit where the antenna is and the control unit in the shack. And I know that works well because on many an occasion I've carelessly tried to connect it up backwards, wondered why it didn't work. And also the USB circuitry, which is one of the interfaces, is optically isolated to cut down any, obviously, computer noise. And a few more. These are software features. It's got a thing called Aziloop, which was requested by a VK user, Steve VK5SFA, and that's a time to memory recall of any of those 4 memories in any combination during any time period you wish to choose. His use case was he often leaves the antenna and his system recording propagation and signals overnight, and he wanted to get the best out of that recording by having Aziloop automatically swing round as propagation changed. I don't know if anybody else is using that, but it's there if anyone wants it. And just recently, in fact, this will be in the next software release, which will be possibly even this week. Again, a user request. Kiwi SDR has got an antenna switch add-on, or now it's now integrated, in fact, into it. And I've added support so that you can use that to switch preset headings in Aziloop. The 2 don't necessarily make good bedfellows because Kiwi SDR has got a considerable lag, and that delay doesn't sit well with Aziloop, which has got a response of under 100 milliseconds. But in terms of switching some broad headings, it's hopefully quite useful to some people, but it was requested anyway. I wouldn't have, in all honesty, thought of doing it myself. There's also OmniRig support. You can use OmniRig to trigger PTT detection instead of the auxiliary I/O, or you can use both together. So that can mute the Aziloop. And coming up in the next release, it will now have optional AF mute. So if you're listening to remote SDR, it will mute the computer audio when you're transmitting to stop feedback, of course. Also, looking at the frequency that OmniRig picks up, it will do auto filter tracking. Those 4 filters I mentioned, you can elect to automatically drop any or all of them in as you hit those frequency bands. And something else I don't think I've seen before with OmniRig, it was a bit tricky to write the software for, but it works great, is rig sync. You can use the 2 rigs in OmniRig to keep one in track with the other. Pick one as the feed and the other one will follow it. And you can track the 2 in frequency and mode. So if you've got a remote SDR, as of course I've got, I can lock it to when I'm transmitting, or vice versa. And I'm also considering adding a calibration offset, because Perseus SDR is fantastic, and I've actually got 4 of them, but the frequency stability is not good, and when you're on a cold hillside the frequency can drift quite a bit. So I may do that, I don't know. So okay, that's enough of that just for the moment. So how did it all start? Let's go back in time. Okay, so here we are. The year is 2015, and this is my home QTH on top band. If you look at the S meter on the right hand side, that's the daytime noise floor on top band, 10 dBs over 9. And I suspect if you remove that broad white noise, you'd find other sprogs and noises underneath, and it's well, as the saying goes, turtles all the way down, or perhaps sprogs all the way down in this case. So this is me, that's where I am, that's my antenna on the right hand side. Very hard to spot as people walk past. And I've got a modest dwelling there, just half a semi with a narrow plot. The antenna itself, or the tower, is at the top left of that yellow line. And back in 2006, there weren't many people around. It was sort of a rural area really, but it was still noisy. And I showed you the plot on the trace on top band just a minute ago. But if you look at it now, we've got a different situation again. And at the top here, we've got a country park, half of which is now turned into an expansion of an industrial estate. We've got a semi-derelict yard, which is turned into, this is fully developed now, a housing development. You've got what we over here call a clay hole that's been filled in. There's a lot of clay around Buckley, famous for pottery in the past. It's now 300 houses. And right next door is a small housing development, and that house there, as you can see, is right next to the antenna. And what I predicted would happen happens, and clearly it's been filled with LED lights, and I don't need to tell you the rest. So I went through several stages of despair really here, and if you tune 80 meters, around 80 meters, if they're not talking about knee operations, most people are talking about the amount of noise that's around, and that could well have been me in that photograph, or maybe he's talking about a painful knee, I don't know. So people think, oh, I've had enough of this, I'm going to just pack in the hobby. And you do see in places like Ham Radio Deals, people sadly packing in and leaving the hobby. You might become obsessed with this, but you shouldn't be, because there are ways to fix this. You could actually take up another hobby, perhaps, if you do want to throw in the towel. I don't know about stamp collecting. I mean, one good thing about stamp collecting is there's no RF noise from stamps, and you don't need any planning permission. But it might be RFID stamps, I suppose. I don't know. Then again, if you were stamp collecting, you wouldn't care about the RF noise, would you? But you see the point anyway. And you don't need to do this. So you don't need to move house. And for a point of clarification, I'm implying here you don't have to move your own house. I'm not suggesting that while your neighbours are at work, you get a crane over and move their house. Neither am I suggesting you do this. blow the neighbour's house up while they're at work. Although in the case of Jeremy Clarkson's house, some people might think perhaps that's a good idea. This is, as you will probably know, most people will know, is a very famous episode of a classic Top Gear series. And those two reprobates, laughing their heads off, did actually blow up Jeremy Clarkson's house. He knew about it, of course. It was all rigged, not just with explosives. And I believe that he wanted to knock it down and build a better house on the plot. And I think that's what he did. So all you need to do is move your receive antenna. You don't need to move your transmit antenna. You don't need to move house. It's just quiet reception that you're after. So where would you move it? Well, I thought long and hard about this for a couple of weeks, and I finally had the brainwave. I know, perhaps farmland could be a good bet. So I thought there must be a few farms around, and I don't know, how many farms do you think there are in the UK? Don't leave anything in the comments, because I'm just about to tell you the answer. 10,000? 25,000? I don't know, 50,000? Would that be too many? Possibly. Well, the answer is 200,000. That's from the internet, so it must be trusted. In 2023, 200,000 farms. Can you believe it? I find it hard to believe. So how many active hams are on in the UK? I don't know, I'm guessing, but it's going to be less than 10,000, I would have said. Well, even if it is 10,000, that's 20 farms each. And as you'll see there, the other thing I'm surprised at is they occupy 72% of this great land of ours. Sounds like the farming programme, this. But how do you find these farmers? Well, they're not going to come to you, are they? So you're going to have to find the farmer, basically. So how would you do that? This is meant to be light-hearted, by the way, this bit, as you probably gathered. So, well, you just ask people is a good thing to try. And on the law of averages, if you keep asking people, you're bound to bump into someone who owns a farm. And I'm suggesting that you ask many different people, not the same people, over and over again. Otherwise, you're likely to have them so fed up they're likely to buy a farm just to stop you asking. So I don't know, where do you go outside amateur radio? Is there a life outside amateur radio? Well, maybe you have something like a dance hobby, for instance. So you could try asking people there. I'm not sure if that's the best chat up line you could pick, but needs must. But you never know until you ask. And in actual fact, I put this on here because at one time I did have a dancing hobby and was dancing quite a few nights a week at one time for several years. I have to say I was not always as you see me now, sadly. And I bumped into a new lady there and got talking and said, oh, by the way, where do you live? And she said, oh, you won't know it. It's a farm in the middle of nowhere. Is it? Ah. She looks at me surprised, like, why is that interesting? What's your internet like? Even more puzzled. And I explained to her what it was I was looking for in a farm. And she said, well, we'll pop over and have a look. And I did. And I've been there ever since. Or rather, the remote site's been there ever since. It's purely a business relationship, but the antenna's been there ever since. I did go home. That's just a random picture on the right. That's not the lady in question. Although clearly she's successful, and here it comes. I was hoping to stop myself. She's outstanding in her own field. I do apologise for that. So one thing you need to do really is to oil the wheels of all this is talk the right language. And again, there wasn't a problem in my case, but I think you need to accept that you shouldn't expect something for nothing really, and if you're prepared to pay a modest amount, and I think I said, how about if you get your internet for free, which is a modest amount per month, but it represents something tangible. Or maybe you can make other arrangements. You could perhaps offer to help out on the farm. It's actually a sheep farm, which does explain some unfortunate confusion. So the location is near Denbigh in North Wales. It's just west of me, and that shows on the right there where I am in the country. And it's been operational almost years. That should say 10 years. It said 9.5 until an hour ago, and I forgot to put the 10 in. Oh well. So 20 miles of coax, and there are plenty of remote SDRs around, I suppose, but it's kind of cheating. You get much more satisfaction doing this sort of thing yourself with remote receive setups, and it's almost a sub hobby in itself. I could talk for several hours, in fact have done in various club talks, about setting up and running remote stations and what could possibly go wrong, and in my case you wouldn't believe it. But we'll move on anyway. So this is the very first day. I found this picture when I was researching this. That's a Wellbrook loop at the bottom of that pole in the middle there, and this was just a very simple lash up, just a loop, no Aziloop, just a Wellbrook loop, proof of concept. And it was there near a barn because there was mains there and there was a Wi-Fi link back to the router. But I have to say, I was absolutely staggered by the difference in reception compared to what I could hear at home. It was just amazing, and that was it. I was hooked on doing this, and that's the way things started really. So moving on a little bit. So that's the first antenna. It ended up being there in a corner of the field. That upright piece of wood appears to be a vertical railway sleeper, which is perfect for clamping a pole to. I mean, what are the chances you bump into a railway sleeper? You know, you could walk into it in the dark and you probably would, knowing my luck. But there it is, and it's perfect for doing this, and I've been using that for all sorts of antennas since. So up there with me is, I mentioned sheep. There are drawbacks to having sheep on site, and you can see one of them, and I think it's actually this sheep here. It just looks like it's saying, as soon as you're gone, matey, I'm going to get chomping. The other thing about that antenna, the coax, it's CTF 100, which is underground cable, which probably would work fine. I don't think the sheep would get at it there. But I discovered afterwards that it's not UV resistant. And apart from the sheep, the outer casing turned as brittle as barley sugar and barley rock, and it was just hopeless. The whole thing was written off, and I had to put something less tasty in for them. So I then wanted more than a fixed loop, as I say. I wanted to get the most value out of this. So the first multi-mode antenna I developed wasn't at that time named Aziloop, but it was an 8-way system, and that was what the software looked like at the start. And the shack end control unit was that silver box, bottom left, and the head unit, people will recognise that as a masthead preamp box. I imported those from Germany. And you can see a prototype on at the top, and slightly less of a prototype underneath it with the orange relays, although it's completely different now. So this evolved eventually into a 24-way and a 72-way, which is 5 degrees, which is where we are now. So the head unit, if you like, evolved into the Aziloop white box there, and the software evolved as much as anything as I learned to make it better. And the shack end unit evolved from what is actually a Hammond box, that top one, into the enclosure, the black enclosure that I have now. That was a last minute thing before I almost went into production with this, because I realised how relatively easy it was to add Ethernet to the unit. Unfortunately, I didn't figure that out quick enough to avoid ordering 50 of those silver boxes, and I've still got most of them in the cupboard. It's probably a good point to mention that controlling this is done via software, as you can see, as opposed to a switch box. That lets me easily control it from anywhere else without having to take a switch box with me in a very long piece of wire. And of course you can modify the software to make it do all sorts of things, but almost impossible to do that with a switch box. And also, if you've got an SDR on a screen, the obvious place to me to put the control of the antenna would be right next to it. And the antenna evolved, as I've said, into well, two loops, two orthogonal loops, which you can see there. And I seem to use that right-hand picture quite a lot, so maybe there should be a prize for counting how many times you see that that image. So the production version, let's have a look. I'm not going to get too technical. This is an overall diagram of the system, and you can see it's divided into a shack area and an antenna area, and I've gone through these boxes already. I call this CIU, the Common Interface Unit, and that's where the BATC would normally sit in a conventional system, and the preamp in a conventional system is where the LCU, the loop control unit, sits, and then you've got the antenna. This is the inside of the antenna unit, the LCU. That box is UV protected. It's made for the job. It's specifically designed for external electronics, and I've never known one leak even in the slightest. If it wasn't for those two clamps, compression glands at the bottom, you could allegedly put it in 1 meter of water, presumably held down with a brick, because if it hadn't leaked it would float, but it's not supposed to leak. I'm using rising cage clamps in there. There's better quality ones to hold the cables, and you've got connectors, those compression glands, for up to 8mm thick coax. And I'm not using sockets on there. A lot of antennas and external things use sockets, and I've never thought BNC sockets and the like is a good choice for external things, and to have to put a plug on in the middle of a field just because there's a socket on the unit doesn't seem a good choice to me. So I decided that you could bring the coax straight in, and there's no unpleasant soldering involved. Just strip back the cable and away you go. And of course the loop wires go straight into the box as well. So the block diagram of the LCU, both of these, by the way, I forgot to mention on the other one, are microprocessor controlled. You've got the stepped azimuth unit, the secrets of which, of course, I'm not going to describe in any detail whatsoever. But there is also a facility in there for varying the K9AY load resistor. You've got the filters, which I mentioned, and you've got the preamp, which we've covered, I think. And that's basically it. So you've got connections for the two loops, and you've got the earth connection for the K9AY earth. So the CIU has got those functions. We've covered it, I think. The attenuator, USB Ethernet connectors, the 3.5mm jack for the I/O ports, and of course that takes 13.8 volts in the front, and the antenna connections to the receiver and the RF connections to the receiver and the antenna are at the back, and microprocessor, Ethernet, USB in there, opto isolation, and the attenuator sits in there. So Aziloop. This is a diagram of what it looks like. I'm only illustrating one antenna, but you have got two orthogonal loops. This is illustrated with radials. Now, Gary Breed's K9AY didn't show radials. In fact, he only ever, I think, refers to ground. But I've discovered that there's some advantages in using radials, which we'll discuss in a moment. This is the sort of size that I'm recommending people start with, as opposed to the full Gary, which has got 25-foot sides as opposed to 15. And PA0FSB, Franz, says that the counterpoise is for the E-field antenna capacitance. So the Earth is not performing the function you would imagine if that was, say, a quarter wave vertical. And Franz has got a very good document. Is that showing up? Yes. If you Google PA0FSB, you should find it. I think I only understand half of it, so you're doing well if you understand all of it. So one of the things that people ask is what size antenna. So you've got the full size as recommended by Gary antenna, which I think you shouldn't really exceed, or you've got what we're recommending for most situations, the one with the roughly 15-foot larger sides. And if you look at the two plots underneath, the elevation plots, you'll see that and that's, I think you can just see 7.2 megs. That's for 40 meters. And as Gary says himself, the K9AY does not perform well on 40, but it only doesn't work well on 40 because it's too large for 40. So if you make it, say, half the size, it's like the equivalent of a full-size one on 80. And the antenna sizes I'm recommended there are pretty much, when you model it, the maximum you can get away with and get a good performance on 40 meters. So I think it's easy to spot the difference between the performance on 40 meters between those two antennas, and it's essentially just the size of the antenna. Talking about elevated radials and the quality of an earth, in actual fact a poor earth is better. If you look at that diagram, the thick line is for a very good earth, and that's got the largest lobe sticking out of the back, and that doesn't help front to back, of course. On the other hand, that gives you the most output from the front, but you're only talking about a couple of dBs, and I think on balance it's probably better to do away with the rear lobe and give away a couple of dBs. So I recommend elevated radials in most situations, and most people who've discussed what they've done with me use elevated radials. And I'm not aware of anyone whose antenna is not working to their satisfaction. So being independent to the real Earth, you can fine-tune the size of the radials to optimize the performance, and indeed you can mount the antenna at any height. Above antler height, quite a few people do, if the cat has antlers. And one user even tried it 60 foot up a tower, although in actual fact the noise excuse me, the noise wasn't any lower out there, so he took it back down again. And it's almost unaffected by rain if you use elevated radials. So you can optimize front to back compared to the Earth, because you can't really mess around too much with the Earth connection. So talking about the size of the antennas then, and that is what I'm talking about. How big is big enough? Well, I'm a great believer in this concept of external noise limiting. And if we look at this diagram here, if we just take a reference, and that's just almost meaningless, but let's just call that zero noise from anywhere. Any system will have a level of signal noise, of system noise. And you need to make sure, really, with the antenna, that there's sufficient output for the band noise to be higher than the system noise. And if you don't do that, as here, excuse me, you've lost, in that case, say 6 dB of signal. So you're not getting all the signal you want to get. If you contrast with this, if we arrange the band noise to be above the system noise by at least 6 dB, you are external noise limited. So regardless of what the system noise happens to be, i.e. how poor in a way your receiver is, as long as your band noise exceeds that, you're going to hear everything on the band, because anything you can hear has got to be above the band noise. I see lots of receiver tests or antenna tests that seem to miss this point, and they're not really comparing the right things. But you can't go too far with exceeding the system noise. Don't overdo it, basically. As well as every system having a system noise point, there is also an overload point. And the trick is to put your signals in the Goldilocks area of not too weak and not too strong, so that you don't hit the overload. As you can see in the bottom diagram there, if you put in too much gain to raise your band noise above the system noise, you're raising the whole reference floor, if you like, of any signals that come in, and you're quite likely to overload the receiver or stress it somewhat. And even though the dynamic range of the system with no antenna is exactly the same, the actual dynamic range is now compressed. So there's a balance to be had there. And it's very easy to think that there's something wrong with the antenna if the noise output is much less than your transmit antenna. But it's not about the noise, the signal level, it's about the signal to noise. And as long as the level from the antenna is doing that, you're okay. So even at a quiet site, which my main remote site is, band noise can vary considerably between night and day. Once a band opens up, you're exposed, as we know, to millions of power supplies, LED lights, solar panels, and MPPT controllers are a nightmare. So you need to select an antenna size for external limited performance at the times you operate, and indeed on the band in question. So I'm going to show you a little video shortly that shows that at my remote site, and quite a few videos are going to have well, they'll all have the Aziloop visible in there. So just a quick walkthrough of this, and I think it's self-explanatory. Title bar and menu bar at the top, which is standard Windows features. The main panel is the compass panel, and that's where you change heading by just, well, literally clicking on a heading, really, as you'll see as we go through. There are the 4 memories underneath. To the right are the 2 auxiliary I/O channels. Above those you've got how you select the load resistance. To the right is the bandpass filter panel, and then, as you can see, you've got the preamp and the attenuation panels. This is actually an older picture. There's actually 5-degree segments now on the compass. That one shows 15, but that's the idea. So this one now, this first video is just going to look at the comparison between night and day. So rather than say what I'm going to say, I'll let me say it. So this is 160 meters, about 1:30 in the afternoon, from my main remote site where I've got an Aziloop and we're connected to it. It's currently in loop mode, and I'm just looking at the noise floor and to see whether we're currently external noise limited. So the way to check that is to drop in an out of band filter. So if I drop in the 500 kc low pass filter like that, you'll see that there's hardly any difference. You can just about see maybe a dB or so difference to the noise floor, and you can tell it's working because you can see those sprogs are disappearing, and that incidentally is a good way of checking whether you've got sprogs in your system or something coming in actually from the antenna, and clearly that's coming in from the antenna. So really, we're not external noise limited at the moment. There's not enough noise from the antenna to override the system noise and get the best signal to noise ratio for the system. If we come back, which we will shortly, to have a look at this in the evening when the band's opened up, we'll see how much the noise floor has changed. And if I just change that to average, you can see we're at about -114 thereabouts. So we'll see the difference later. Well, here I am again. It's now coming up to 8 PM the same day, and we're back on 1947 looking at the noise floor in the evening. Everything's exactly the same, by the way. Thing again. You can see there's quite a difference, and we've got plenty of noise contribution from the antenna. So we're external noise limited without any doubt at all. So it depends what time of day and what frequency you want to listen on to the best advantage to determine what size of antenna you need, bearing in mind, of course, that the larger the antenna, the more difficulty you may have getting some sort of directivity out of it on the higher frequencies. Incidentally, while we're here, just to give you an idea of how much signal the Aziloop can pick up in the evening, and this again is a small antenna. It's not the larger K9 size, and you can see we're up to S9 plus 50 at times there on some of those brutal 40-meter broadcast stations. Okay, so there was no adjustment of the S meter there. Anyone who has a Perseus will know that the S meter is very accurately calibrated, and 50 over is 50 over. So there's a couple of millivolts coming into the system. Aziloop's quite happy with that, by the way. The preamp can cope with that. In fact, sometimes Perseus overloads, and my preamp is quite happy. So let's have a look now at some user installations. I'm not sure who this reprobate is, but that was his antenna in 2020, and already the antenna has become the new box. And as I might have said, the development of this system has been going on for quite a few years before I was probably persuaded to sell it commercially, because several people were asking for one. This is the installation from Dale W4OP in North Carolina, and he's made a very nice central hub for supporting his radials, and he's got fiberglass rods there. I'm not sure if the wires are taped directly to them or they just outriggers, but very neat self-supporting installation. But Dale's got a machine shop there, and you may know he makes bespoke filters for amateurs and commercial companies alike. This is the installation. This was one of my beta testers, actually. This is my good friend Howarth GW4GTE. I think when I first met him, I was probably just left school, and it just sort of gives you an indication. You don't have to have a hugely large antenna, and as we've pointed out with the noise floor, it depends where you want to listen, really. What your local noise is, of course, as to what level your noise floor is, and so on. This one here is special. This is Steve, my good friend over in Australia, and I think I'm right in saying he actually bought the very first one that was shipped abroad, certainly the first in Australia. He's a retired broadcast engineer, and I think appreciated the potential of this thing, and that's his location. And he says, my Aziloop has been on the air in a hostile environment for over 1 year without issue. Hostile meaning there's animals around there chewing at things, and I think even now it's 40 degrees centigrade, and there are daily thunderstorms, and it's been absolutely fine. The other thing, and I think I probably learnt this from Steve, he's used stainless steel wire for this antenna, and that's a very good choice, really, if you want the thing to be sturdy, especially if you put it somewhere where there's animals. And you can buy it very cheaply on places like Amazon, really quite cheaply, and it's I think I'm right in saying it's lighter than copper, so it's not hugely heavy, and you can buy it with a plastic coating as well. And he says it played a key role in helping me obtain DXCC on 160 meters. Next up is Ray and Bob in Adelaide, or near Adelaide also. and I think they were very much influenced by feedback from Steve. I won't read all of that, but it says during the Trans-Tasman Low Bank contest, all the VK stations were running an Aziloop were able to totally null out Russian radar that came up and wiped out most of the band. And I like the comment, what radar? Without the ability to null that out, from what they tell me, you're very much at a disadvantage. And in fact, in that contest, the winner and the runner-up, which was indeed Steve, were both using Aziloops as part of their station. This is my friend John, G3PQA in Berkshire. Again, you can see, I think, that there's elevated radials involved there. John is very knowledgeable about antennas, and we've had some very good discussions and are still talking about these antennas. He's now got 2 of these, and we're looking at ways of combining them. Elevating the radials, here's an illustrated example. He's never mentioned to me any huge difference in performance, but there's a huge difference in the ground, as you can see. That part of his garden floods quite often. So, okay. If you've lasted until now, you'll now be rewarded with some demonstrations. So well done. If you've fast forwarded later on to here, well, I'll let you off. I quite understand. So we're now going to do some demonstrations. The first one, in fact, let me just bring it up. The first one is 252 kilohertz radio Algiers, and this is kind of a DF demo as well, but this just gives you an idea of how you actually operate Aziloop and how you would do to sort of peak stations, perhaps, or get the best out of your reception. Let's play it. This is an example of listening to a station in Algiers on 252. It's currently 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so let's try and get a heading on this. Okay, looks like it's there. Something we like when we have the K9 mode. The angle is very low, so the loop should be doing quite well as it is, but it does look like it's clearly where it is. So let's have a look how well we did. Not bad. So that's radio Algiers on 252. I used to use 252 as a reference frequency because on that channel used to be RTE from Ireland. And sadly they closed down. And I wanted to record the close down, and it was advertised as to when that would be. I even emailed them for precisely when it was going to be, and they told me, and it wasn't then. I think they were meaning that the last program on the channel, the last voice, as opposed to when it actually went off air. But I was determined to catch it. I don't know why. And I left my system recording for over a week, 24 hours a day, to catch it. But catch it I did. So here, as a little piece of history, is the very last transmission from RTE1.
Thank you for listening.
And there it is, without so much as a by your leave. Someone must have pulled a big switch somewhere, locked the door and gone home. That in the background was Algiers, which now has the frequency pretty much to itself. If we look at a even lower frequency, remember I mentioned that it will go much lower than the frequencies that were suggested. This is DCF in Germany. So we're just having a little play about on 77 kilohertz with DCF 77 from Germany. And beaming at it at the moment at K9AY mode. If I reverse that, amazing northern light, that's really good. You see some differences around there changing quite a lot as well. Quite critical on the road family. Doesn't make anything like this any difference. So the loop mode, sometimes one's better, sometimes the other's better. So clearly it's nice to have the benefit of both options. That's good. Okay. Oh, just one thing. Let's just have a look at what we're like on the heading for this. And yeah, you can see that the output at lower frequencies is actually much higher in loop mode. The roll off of amplitude in loop mode is much less than the roll off in amplitude in K9AY mode. In K9AY mode, it appears to roll off at about 12 dB per octave, so not insignificant. Although in practice, it sometimes seems better than that. But again, it's all to do with the noise floors, really. Coming up next, there's a couple more. Is a little montage, rather than just keep flipping between them, of some SIGINT possibilities, this time around 4 megs, just to prove that it will work at higher frequencies. And a look at some NDBs, where I pick one out from underneath another, and then getting rid of some MPPT solar interference, which is the sort of thing that some people might be interested in. So here we go. There's no talking on this one. There will be on the other two. So I'm going to look at nulling out that first transmission, and you can see I'm doing that irrespective of the second one, and then I'm going to have a look at the second one as well, the one just HF of it. And you eventually develop a skill to sort of roll round the dial, as it were. And this is showing you just the compass, and you can see that the load value is a little window inside the compass when you're just showing that panel. All the panels, I should have said before, are collapsible apart from the compass one. Okay. This shows how you can wheedle out a weak NDB underneath a much stronger one by using the front to back ratio of Aziloop. We're on 368 kilohertz. This is WTD, which is Waterford in Ireland, and if I reverse the Aziloop in K9AY mode. Incidentally, you can see I've changed the palette to resemble Perseus. That's WHI, which is that's the colours of the app. Which is completely overpowering Waterford. If I move back, there is Waterford. This is, as you can see, a severe problem of interference on 80 metres. It's actually an MPPT solar regulator, and you can see it hunting around. So there's quite a lot of interference. Let's see if we can use Aziloop to get rid of it. Okay, I think it's roughly over here. Let me just try reversing it first. Okay, let's just tune around a bit. Okay, that's fighting back a bit. Check we're doing something useful. Let's see if we can adjust the load. Ah, right. Okay. So that looks like a good result. So what you might be stuck with is that, but if you're using Aziloop, what you could actually get is that. Okay, and that illustrates, I think, quite well. If you happen to have some local noise, which that certainly was, you can use the fine direction capability of something that you can very, very quickly rotate to get rid of it. Of course, you could do that with a rotator if you arrange something, but apart from the high cost of a rotator, it's going to take you a minute to do 180 degrees quite often to move the antenna around to somewhere else. And of course, you're going to get that occasion, it's going to hit the end stop and you're going to have to come all the way back around again. But in any case, to do that sort of thing, you really do need a rapid directional change capability. And as far as I know, there is nothing else currently available. Now, you might have thought, okay, but you haven't shown me any amateur bands. Well, it's far easier, of course, to demonstrate on fixed permanent carrier transmissions. But just to finish off, here's one on 80 meters looking at the grey line DX to ZL. And that that radar that Steve mentioned is the same radar that Steve in Australia mentioned was a problem in that contest. So with a good antenna, you're copying that over here. ZL1IU, of course, is not a normal station in a sense over there. He's actually got this for an antenna. So he's doing some of the heavy lifting there, but of course you've got to play your part and have a half decent receive setup at the other end. In fact, several people who've got Aziloops do have 4 squares, and I don't have one, but they've reported to me that at times the performance of the Aziloop, and in all honesty I'm talking about the performance of an optimized K9AY really, is better. Not always. Sometimes one wins, sometimes the other wins. But of course, as the saying goes, you cannot have too many antennas, and the ability to switch between them and pick the best is an advantage. And of course, if you're in a contest, every dB can help. So, hopefully then now you will understand the difference between loop and K9AY antennas. Why perhaps you might want something that has got both antennas in the same single solution, and setting up any antenna really, the importance of establishing external noise limiting so that you're getting the best performance out of what you spent good money on. And obviously I hope you understand now what Aziloop is and how well it works. And so with that, thank you very much for watching, and it's back to David in the studio.
Thank you very much, Dave. I must say there were some really amusing bits there, and the fact that you wouldn't have heard us giggle or anything is no reflection on that they weren't funny. We just purely muted our mics because we were coughing and spluttering as we have been. So I'm really sorry about that, but there were some real fun moments there. So if you've been watching this at home live now on Wednesday evening and you'd like to ask questions or make comments on anything that you've seen, Dave is here. He's happy to answer, I'm sure, anything, almost anything about, except how does it work, then please do so now, either on BATC or on Facebook. Dave, I'd like to kick it off really by just saying, asking really what your background is, because when we met a few hours ago really with a rehearsal with this, you said that this is not something you set out to do originally. You didn't set out to start a business and make it. It was just purely a demand when you made a few and people started asking you. So what's your own professional background?
Well, professionally, I mean, I've been involved in radio, professionally in one sense or another, but before I retired, more data communications with a number of companies. Started off with the MOD and went through various roles to do with radio engineering and then data comms. Ended up working for Compaq, well, before that DEC actually, Digital Equipment Corporation, only to find shortly after I joined, and they didn't tell me this, funny enough, they were bought by Compaq, and that was the point I thought, enough. And then started to look at coming up with things. In fact, I do have another channel called s9plus.com, and together with Eric, GW8LJJ in South Wales, well, he actually puts kits together of various things I've tinkered with and designed in the AM sector. Really, I've designed some AM transmitters, and he still supplies those, and I believe he tells me in the hundreds. I've never supplied any. I did the bit I enjoy, which was designing it, and he's done the bit which he enjoys, which is putting the kits together. And there we are. But so yeah, a sort of a background, not an RF engineering design background, and a lot of this I suppose I learn as we go along. And these days, things like ChatGPT and Grok are very useful sources of information, although they weren't around, of course, when I designed this. But a lot of it's evolution. We're all tinkerers, I think, aren't we? And you want to improve things and improve it. And one of the difficulties I had when thinking about turning this into a commercial venture, which I originally didn't have any intention of doing, was, and I've heard this said before, all inventors, if you like, have a problem with knowing when to stop, draw a line, and get the thing out there. And when you're in a company working for someone else, and they're telling you to design it, you design it, and then the job done, and you're on to something else, or they'll take it off you and hand it over to marketing. But this has gone through many, many iterations. I mean, the very first one is this here. This is an early prototype, and there's been dozens of variations. I think the order number for PCBs is now over number 200 for this. Quite a few of which, well, some are production ones, but most of it are development. And the development, in fact, still goes on. There are a number of things I'm working on now, but knowing this is going to be on the internet for all time, I'm not going to say what they are in case they never appear. And one thing which is a pet hate of mine is people launching equipment that isn't fully developed before it goes for sale, and using your first early adopters as guinea pigs. And the design of this has not changed from the first one that went commercially on sale, and there's no intention to do so. As you've seen from the videos, it works. So, as they say, if it works, don't fix it. Back to you, David.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that, sharing that. Without giving any away secrets, I mean, would you say that the novelty value in it, i.e. the things that are unique, are they more in the software side or the hardware side, or a bit of both?
I think mainly the uniques are in the hardware side, because that's not been done before. The dual mode antenna, which in a sense is the simpler part, or the electronic rotation, hasn't been done before. You could, I suppose, have that controllable from a box on the bench with knobs on. But these days I'm more of a software engineer than a hardware engineer, in that most of the development now is in the software side and is still continuing. And so yeah, I think there's some bit of innovation in there, maybe. At least I thought so at the time. But you'll find very few antennas that have got a computer control interface like that, because there's very few antennas that do that, if any, I suppose.
Yeah, certainly. I've never seen anything like that, and it's really incredible. And not to have moving parts, especially when you've got a remote site, such obvious advantages. And we've got a couple of comments and questions which we'd like to relay to you. By the way, also a ringing endorsement from Chris G0DWV, who says that he's got one and it's good. So
thank you, Chris. Appreciate that.
Ray G3XLG says, if you use elevated radials for the dog and me to walk under, say 2 meters, what height of mast is required and what radius is recommended?
Well, the best way of answering that really is to refer you back to the diagrams I showed you in the presentation, or in fact, if you download the user guide from my website, which is quietradio.co.uk, you can download the user manual, which is now up to about 140 pages.
Wow.
Of bedtime.
That's a lot, yes.
Yeah, well, another pet hate of mine is people putting things out with no information, and then expecting users to read your mind. And it goes into that in great detail, so I could probably best refer you to that. I'm not trying to dodge the question, but all I would be doing is repeating what's in there. But the size of antenna is to do with selecting the right noise floor, as we mentioned and showed in that video. And it's not overcritical. There's no cliff edge on this. It's not like 1 more millimetre and it just won't work, because it covers a broad range of frequencies anyway. And of course, halve the frequency, and it's like the antenna is halved in size as well. So all I can suggest is read the user guide and suck it and see. I mean, the guidelines, I suppose, in terms of min and max, that the maximum would be the full Gary, as I call it, and the minimum, I would say, is something half the size. So, well, the full Gary has got 25-foot sloping sides, something half that. But you will get a lot less output on the lower frequencies, although it will work directionally in K9AY mode to higher frequencies. So decide what bands you want to listen to the most, and the only way at the end of the day is to try it and see.
Well, the heart of our hobby is experimentation, but anyway, over on BATC, Jim G3YLA says, very impressive, Dave. In terms of adjustment across, say, the CW segment of 80 metres, would it require constant tweaking, or does it have fairly broad characteristics?
Right. Thanks, Jim. I've watched your weather in the past many times. I should have mentioned, actually, it's broadband. In a phasing system where you're combining two antennas to null out some local noise, as anyone who's tried that will know, move a few kcs away and the nulls disappear. And I think that might be what Jim is referring to. But this is a broadband system, and if you produce a directional null at one frequency, it will be at all frequencies. The amplitude response will change, but the shape of the reception pattern won't. So it's different to there's phasing in there. I think you could probably assume that anyway. I'm not giving any secrets away, but it's broadband phasing. So to answer the question, you don't have that problem where if for instance you nulled out that MPPT noise on one frequency, assuming the direction of the noise stayed the same, it would be nulled out somewhere else as well.
Thank you, Dave. That is the end of our sort of questions from people. I'm sure they're going to have a look at your website, and maybe you'll even get some people buying it from you. And I can imagine tomorrow lots of inquiries and people going out for walks trying to bump into farmers or people who own farms. So that's very amusing indeed. Well, we can't wait to see what you do next, Dave. This really is innovative, and I said particularly the rotating bit, and I'm an electronic engineer, and I can't figure out how that's done. So well done on the innovation. It's lovely to see something homegrown as well. Thank you for coming on tonight as well and explaining it to us, and we can't wait to see what comes next.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, David, and maybe I'll come back and talk about something else, another invention in the future.
Please do let us know. We'd love to talk to you again. Oh, we just got one other thing, just quickly come on. Steve G0KYA says, I've tested the Aziloop for Radcom and it was very impressive. I was impressed with its ability on medium wave and could hear US AM stations in March. So there we are. Another ringing endorsement for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Dave Evans, GW4GTE. Thanks very much indeed for joining us tonight on NARC Live.
Thank you.
Thank you. And there we are. That's almost the end of the programme now. Just to quickly go on what's happening at the club over this next 7 days. On Sunday at 7 o'clock, it's the GB2RS News on GB3NB. On Monday at 7:30, the Monday Night Net on GB3MB. And actually a correction, there isn't a CW Net at 8 o'clock this week because it's a CC contest. Thank you to Roger for pointing that out. Next Wednesday, February the 5th, we're meeting back at CNS School. From 7 to 9:30. It's a social, informal and bright sparks for our young members. So please do keep in touch. Don't forget to send us details. If you'd like us to send this card to anybody, we're always happy to do so. And we look forward to seeing you again here in 2 weeks if we don't see you at the school next week. If you have any cures of stopping a cold coming back, this is 3 times for both of us now. I think it's the same one. Please let us know. But other than that, we'll look forward to seeing you soon. So from Tammy M0TC.
Bye-bye.
And from me, David G7RP, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.